inflation, or at least what we're being told about inflation. What got me thinking about this was a post on Facebook. Let me share with you that information. So here's the little meme that somebody put up, right? It's that little lovely red box at the top. No one is going to convince me the economy has been good for the last 4 years. Sorry, I've been to the supermarket. Point one, the economy is more than the prices in the supermarket. I mean, if wages keep up with the inflation, then we really don't have the same effect of the inflation. But I don't even want to go down that road. Let's even just zero in on the comment here about inflation. Now, they say the prices at the supermarket, so I'm assuming it's inflation. Now, I want to also talk about one of the comments from one of the people, because this would be a little bit more on track with where we're actually at in the economy. What you're talking about is not the economy. What you're talking about is inflation. I did not write that. Somebody else did. How's your 401k? How's the stock market? How's unemployment? How's the equity in your home? The economy is far more than just the cost of a dozen eggs, and all of that is true. And by the way, if you do have a 401k, or you do have some sort of retirement savings, or you do have money in the stock market, it has been hitting record highs consistently for at least the last year. When Trump predicted that everything would crash under Biden, wrong. And if I seem frustrated by this, I am. Because a lot of people don't tune into this. They just assume that what they hear is the truth, and it's not the truth. This is the other thing. Because I'm going to give you truth here, and I'm going to give you facts, and I'm going to try to drop the fear. Trump spreads a lot of fear, and he does it because he's lying to you. Much of what he's telling the American people is not true. When he says he had the best economy, and I'm going to show you some of those numbers here, he's not telling the truth. So let's get back to this. Let's talk about the inflation, because I highlighted this person's final point of their comment. The economy is honestly doing very well. That's very true. Very, 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 very true. Inflation, not so much. That is not true. Inflation right now is doing very, very well. In fact, let me show you this. This is the inflation rate for September 2024. Since it's October 28th, this is the last month that is available to me. But I have to tell you, this number is not that far off from where we are today. In fact, we might be slightly lower than this. All of these resources, the one that you can see on this slide, I'm going to put in the little doobly-doo, all those little notes. Whenever you tune into a video here at Fearless Finances, I am going to give you the resources. If you are listening to other people who are not giving you the resources and are telling you information, do a little research. But here I will give you the facts to the best that I know them. If I make a mistake, let me know. We all make mistakes sometimes. Just let me know in the comments. We'll get it worked out. But my goal here is not to give you misinformation, it is to give you facts and to empower you so you know where those facts are, so you can look them up if you hear something else. So I will have this link in the little doobly-doo so you can look it up. And please look at the trend that is stated here. Current inflation rate, about 2.5%, 2.4, a little more. August 2.5, July, 2.9. Look at the trend. It's all going down. And look at where it was at 2 years ago. Yes, we were at higher than expected inflation. Now, I think it's worthwhile to stop the share of this information right here and give you a little bit of background here. Historically, we've tried to hit inflation rates between the 3 to 4% range. That was what we tried to do historically. I think the Fed, because by the way, the president doesn't control inflation, the Federal Reserve tries to control inflation through moving the money supply, either putting more money into the marketplace or taking it away, or changing the interest rates at which they let banks have money. We'll get into that in a different video. But for now, no one really controls inflation. The Fed tries, and I got to tell you, and I'll do a history video on this too. I got to tell you, the Fed's done a really good job most recently. When this inflation started to hedge up, and by the way, it was caused by COVID. It's not something Joe Biden did. The whole world was impacted by inflation. I'll give you some of that information in this video too. In fact, the inflation that the United States experienced was far less than most other nations of the world. We'll talk about that. But back to the inflation currently for the United States, it was caused by COVID. And in my opinion, could be wrong about this. This is an opinion, not a fact. It's important to know the difference between opinions and facts. Lots of people are running around there acting like their opinion is a fact, and that is not the case. It's their opinion. Facts are different, but this is my opinion. When inflation started to go up due to COVID, it was supply-related causes. There's also been some greed and profits from a lot of companies involved in some of the recent inflation. I don't have the facts on that, so we're going to mark that one as an opinion. Everybody with me? When I got the facts and I got an economist backing me up, or more than one, we might go with more along the lines of fact. But it's an opinion of mine that it was also caused by greed. But back to the inflation trends for COVID, it started hedging up, and they said it was supply side related. And they waited to start increasing interest rates. I think they waited too long. But not way too long. Like if you look back to the 1970s and the inflation that happened then, they waited way too long, and they had to have, it was double-digit inflation. We needed to have 20% interest rates to calm it down. That was not good. So at least Jerome Powell at the Federal Reserve started to act and increase the interest rates. And when this started happening, a lot of the pundits started saying, oh, we're going to have to go into a recession to fix this. No, 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 no. I kept saying, we're going to have a soft landing. And this is why I believe that. Is because they've been doing a good job with this stuff. And when I say they, I don't mean Biden, and I don't mean Trump. It's not in their control. Just remember, presidents don't control inflation. The Federal Reserve has some levers they can pull, and they do a pretty good job at it, but even they can't control it exclusively. Okay, so let me give you the proof to back some of this up. Here's the inflation trends according to the Consumer Price Index, the CPI. An entity in the US federal government called the Bureau of Labor and Statistics creates the CPI. Now, there's a lot of different inflation indexes. The CPI is not the one the Fed usually relies on. We'll talk about that in a different video. But the CPI is what Social Security changes their benefit amounts on. Now, you may have also heard that the CPI doesn't include food and fuel and healthcare expenses and other things that the American people spend their money on. That is not true. Again, not true. The CPI actually includes things that Americans spend their money on. Now, there's certain things that they can do with the CPI that can manipulate the values, and as a result, might be far more likely to involve the government getting involved in manipulating these values, but it doesn't really serve them to do it. We'll talk about that more in a different video too. For now, I just want you to look at these CPI numbers and know that it does include most of the things that Americans buy. It really does. It's a very well-rounded basket of goods. In January, year 2000, the CPI was at 2.5. Historically, again, we've tried to keep it between 3 and 4, but most recently, the Feds tried to keep this around 2. Like, that's half of 4. That's a big reduction. But please notice how well they've done at managing that. Look at how many numbers are here that are around the 2% range, 2.5% or less. I want you to also look at how many times you see the value of 0 on here, reflecting no inflation. This occurs in 2010, 2011, and then we have it again in 2016. If you take an average of all of these numbers, you do arrive at a number close to 2%. Now, you start to see inflation rising in 2022, 2023, right? We're going to look at some values dating back to the 1970s. These two annual values for 2022 and 2023 are not the highest amounts of inflation we've ever seen. But then notice by last year, 2023, how it started to hedge down to what we would consider those normal rates. Now, before we move on to some of the other information that I have in here for you, I want to share with you another piece of information. I sometimes think that the American people expect that when inflation goes back down, that the prices go back down. This works. Like inflation means that the cost of these goods generally go up. Now, when you see the zeros on here, those zeros that we saw on that chart, that's considered a period of deflation. And that's when you will see prices start to go down. It's reflected by the 0 instead of a negative sign. Everybody with me? And deflation is not good for the economy. You want to have more money chasing the goods that are out there, right? Than having too many goods and not enough money. If there's not enough money, that means that people don't have enough money to spend, and we start heading into that recession and maybe even a depression. Everybody with me? You don't want deflation. So the prices that we have out there are kind of going to be, for the most part, in a lot of areas, the prices that we're going to have. I know Kamala's talking about going after some of the businesses and if they've been colluding on prices and charging Americans too much, they might have some lawsuits around them. That'd be lovely. I don't count too much on those sorts of things. And it's not that I don't trust Kamala and her intentions to try to do that. It's just hard to get people with a lot of money to change it. So back to the slides. I want to show you a few other pieces of information that might be valuable to you in understanding some of this. Here is the COLA amounts the CPIs, the cost of living adjustments from Social Security dating back to 1975 when these became automatic. Before 1975, if you were collecting Social Security, there had to be an act of Congress for you to have an increase to your Social Security check. So as you can see here, there's that 1980 inflation when interest rates had to hit 20% to try to bring inflation under control, much higher than what we see today. I do want to show you some of these trends though. So I want to bring you or share with you the actual Social Security COLA page. And again, this link is going to be in the doobly-doo. So you will have access to it. Here's what we were looking at, this top part of the chart, right? But I also want to show you this. This is when Obama took office. So in 2008, Obama was running for president. And if you remember, 2008 was also the financial crisis. Obama, when he took office, inherited a mess. So inflation that year was pretty high, but because of the recession, again, remember, recessions aren't good for the economy. It isn't good to have deflation. Notice how you have 2 years of deflation, 2009, 2010. Now, 2011 rolls around, and you know what? Inflation is a little bit high. We're above that 2% target mark. We're at 3.6. But this is the thing that I want you to keep in mind with that. If you average that out over the 4-year period, or even the last 3-year period, not so bad. And then please notice the trends of inflation for Obama in 2012, 2013, 2014, right? All under 2%. Let's look at 2015. Pretty low. 2016? This is when Clinton is running against Trump. Please notice these low measures of inflation. And then Trump takes office in 2017. Now, I know he's been telling people he had this fabulous economy that he put together. He inherited a fabulous economy. And if you actually look at Obama's numbers, they're darn good, especially since he inherited a mess from Bush. Now, again, I am not trying to tell you that each of these presidents are solely responsible for any of this. But our commander in chief does toe the line of what direction we are going to go. And if they do this right and they put the right people in place, things generally go well. One of the other videos that I'm going to do, because I got to tell you, I used to vote Republican. I did. Until I started sharing all this stuff in my classes. And I started to see these trends that indicated to me that honestly, Republicans are not that good at managing the economy. And it doesn't matter what indicator you look at. You could be looking at inflation. You could be looking at the deficit, growth to the national debt, unemployment, wages, and how much they're increasing. It does not matter which of these economic indicators you look at. Generally, people do better under the Democrats. And I will show you with the proof. But for now, let's look at one other indicator. This one is something called the misery index. Now, originally, I wanted to look up the history behind the misery index. The time that I remember the misery index coming to light was when Carter was in office. when Carter ran against Reagan in the 1980s and when we were looking at those really high numbers of inflation. In fact, the highest the misery index has ever been is close to 22% that presidential election year. But like before, what you start to see when you look at these numbers is Carter inherited that from Nixon. Now, for some of you youngins who are in here, you might not know which political party Nixon was or Clinton was, and you might not even know those presidents. I don't know what they're teaching you in school. And even though I couldn't vote through any of these elections, I might be old, but I'm not that old. I do remember them. And since I study them for our classes, I can tell you a little bit about them. So although I couldn't have voted for Carter or Reagan or Nixon for that matter, I do know that generally speaking, Republicans normally had a lot of these indicators increasing, and then Democrats came in and cleaned it up. This is the page for the misery index, and the misery index is simple to calculate. The misery index simply takes the unemployment rate and adds it to the current inflation rate, and from there you can tell how much misery Americans are in. Again, the high was June 1980. Nearly 22%. It's currently at 6.54%, and it's a little bit dated, so it's 2 months ago now. Well, it's actually last month, so that's good. Normally, this is 2 months behind. And the low it's ever been is July 1953. Maybe sometime I'll do a video on the 1950s and how good it was for the economy. But anyway, back to the misery index. You can see here that the current unemployment rate is 4.1 and the inflation rate is 2.2 or 2.44, which we already talked about, right? But the other thing that I like about this resource is it does give you the index by president. So here's our various presidents and what the misery index was at when they were in office. But even if we look at the index by year, as an example, it will note for us who was in the White House during that period of time. Now, remember, right now, the misery index with Joe Biden in the White House is at 6.54. Look at how frequently this number is above that. Even for presidents that we consider having had good economies. In fact, here's Nixon's numbers. We've got Johnson in, and Johnson's a Democrat. We see it rising slightly, but notice how it continues to rise under Nixon. Look at Ford. Look at what Ford handed over to Carter. And then here's Reagan. And mind you, even by 1988, when Bush, the vice president at the time, was then elected into the White House, this misery index is higher than what we have right now under Biden. Here's the Bush years. Here's Clinton. Please notice how these double-digit numbers go down under Clinton. Then we have another Bush come in. Now, it stays in pretty much the same range. But of course, we know that in 2008, we had the major financial crisis. And that's what Obama inherited. And then look at Obama's numbers. And please also notice, before Trump left the White House late in 2020, what the inflation rate was, what the misery index was. He handed this over to Biden. He did not hand him a glorious economy. Trump handed him, I'm going to mark my words carefully. I wanted to say a mess. But it was getting messy, and he wasn't doing anything to fix it. I don't even think he knew it was getting messy. So The last thing I want to share with you is something that I promised when this whole thing started out, is what did this look like compared to the global economy? Now, the world has some other challenges, or I should say, other countries of the world have some other challenges that the United States doesn't necessarily have. Like when Russia invaded Ukraine, causing that conflict, and we put in all the sanctions so that Russia couldn't make as much money or couldn't get as much money in to keep fueling their war machine. This impacted gas prices in Europe a lot more than they did here in the United States because we had the ability to get oil from our own sources. Many of these countries are reliant on Russia and other countries in the area for their oil resources. So I've provided some information on that, what global inflation looks like, and I'll just quite simply tell you two things. One, drop a pin here. The United States is the envy of the world for our economy. Now, I don't have a perfect resource for this, but trust me, do a Google. Open up your Google browser, open up any internet browser you trust, and say, what does the United States economy look like against the world? Is the United States economy the envy of the world? Google it, do some research. If you find something that conflicts with what I say, what I just told you, please post it in the doobly-doo. I'd like to take a look at it and see if it's a reliable resource. We can chat about it. It's worthwhile. And this is the other thing. My son, he lives in Canada. And up in Canada, their inflation was a lot worse than it is or was in the United States. In fact, I went up there for Thanksgiving not that long ago, and my son bought a turkey for us for our Thanksgiving dinner. Now, Canada celebrates Thanksgiving, but they do theirs in October. I was there in November. So maybe their turkey prices were different in October, but my son paid $5 a pound for a turkey. Now, you might not be able to be on the prices right, knowing all the prices of stuff, but you know as well as I do. Well, maybe you don't, so let me tell you. A lot of times during Thanksgiving, you can get turkey for under $1 a pound. Even when it's not Thanksgiving, it is not $5 a pound in the United States. That is not the norm. He paid $55 for an 11-pound turkey. People. So when I tell you in America, we've got it pretty good, we do. And I know I said I had two things to tell you, but here's the third that I think is super important. Economies are cyclical. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. They go around in a boom and bust cycle. It's okay when it busts. It's okay when things go a little haywire. It's okay. We've always gotten through it. And if you come to expect that sometimes that happens, that the stock market goes down, or that inflation goes up, or that we're in a recession, a lot of times out of this comes something better. And the other thing is the people who work at the Federal Reserve or the US Treasury, they learn more about how all of this works every time something like that happens. And in my opinion, again, opinion, they've been doing a pretty good job. There's a lot more here to trust than to not trust. So I hope that helps you understand a little bit more about inflation because that matters to our money. And when we know a little bit more about how all these things work, we don't have to be as afraid. We want to be fearless. So put some notes in the doobly-doo. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if you have any thoughts. Let me know if you found other research. I want to know those things. Like and subscribe because I'm going to be offering you good information about financial matters and other stuff that's related to being fearless. So do it. Be fearless and have fun. I'm glad you stopped by.